Hi, this is Maryland Comptroller Peter Francho. I may not listen to every podcast out there, but I do listen to the Maryland Crabs.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
It's the Maryland Crabs.
It is. I can verify that it is the Maryland Crabs because I'm looking at you and you're half of the Maryland Crabs.
And I'm looking at you're the other half.
And one half as a whole.
It's like a stupid morning show on WAVA or something. That was Don and Mike when I was growing up. The Don and Mike show. Yep. They're really big.
Mike O'Mara and Geronimo?
Don Geronimo and Mike O'Mara. I think they both still have podcasts. Yep. But they were the wacky morning team with like the bells and the horns and all that. And
they're down in one of them's down in Ocean City now, I think.
Yeah. His wife died. That was Don Geronimo. His wife was in a car accident when she was coming back years ago. She was a lovely lady. Very nice. She used to come on the show all the time. But we're not those wacky morning guys.
Yeah, no, I wasn't down here for the wacky morning.
We had Don and Mike, and we had the Grease Man, and we had Howard Stern for a while, and then the Grease Man. The Grease Man was a god in this area. Right. Doug Tracht. He's still, I think he's doing podcasts now, too. And then we had...
Jack Diamond was the big morning guy.
I don't know. I think that was much later. That was... Okay. I'm talking about like the 80s. The big ones in the 80s were the Grease Man and Don and Mike. They were always going back and forth.
The Grease Man.
He was huge. I can't tell you how big he was. I mean, he was just massive in this area.
What area? Like you grew up in Bethesda?
Yeah, well, DC area, so it was everybody. It wasn't just us. But then he got canned after, I guess he called, oh no, that was Howard Stern where he called Air Florida right after they went into the 14th Street Bridge. You remember that? He called the...
That would have been in 81, but... No, I don't remember.
Yeah, he called Air Florida and asked when the next flight to the 14th Street Bridge was, and they canned him. I think he was here for like a minute.
Well, Stern's notorious for that with the people get on there and Baba Booey.
But yeah, he's like almost 70 and he's still a god. He's the best interviewer in the business. I mean, besides us, but I mean, he really is. Well, Mark Maron is. I think Mark Maron is amazing. If you don't listen to WTF with Mark Maron, that's a great podcast. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to interviews, I think Howard Stern's one of the best that's ever been.
I'll give you that one too.
Yeah. And I'm not even a super huge Stern fan.
I'll tell you what, talking about interviews, this one...
that's called a segue.
A little bit ago, I got an interesting email, and I think it may have been even misaddressed, and I wasn't supposed to get it. So I replied to it. and it intrigued me. The way it read was sort of like there's this mythical man that lives in the basement of St. John's.
That's like Laszlo from Real Genius. He lives down in the steam tunnels.
Never sees the light of day, and the kids... believe he exists, but nobody's ever seen him to prove it. It was one of those type of things. And I called the publicist. I said, okay, what is the deal with this? And they said, Gary Dunkelberger is... That
doesn't even sound like a real name.
I know.
That sounds like a fake name that Mort Saul would make up or something.
No. And he does work in the basement of Mellon Hall. Students very rarely go down there. And his job is to create scientific...
He wears a cape and a mask.
No, not quite. But he creates scientific tools that the masters, the old people, the people that St. Johnny's study would have used back in their day.
Like it's really kind of trebuchet.
So, I mean, I was blowing my mind that there's like some guy living in the basement of Mellon Hall that nobody knows exists, or they think they exist. Yet St. John's teaches science?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
I mean, that was my other thing. I was like, wow, okay.
Like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? They do the calculation.
But it was really fascinating. And to see around his shop and the different tools and the different, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for, the pieces of equipment that he fabricates, because this stuff is...
in his laboratory.
Yeah. I mean, when we joked about it. We said, yeah, it's not something that you can call Edmund Scientific and say, hey, send me a flux capacitor.
I just picture in my mind like Da Vinci's Notebook with like all those designs in there with like those kind of Rube Goldberg sort of devices.
Not too far off. Let's get right into it.
All right.
When you think of Watermark, you probably think of Harbor Queen. You know, the big white boat that sits down at the end of City Dock. But did you know that Harbor Queen is much more than just a visitor attraction? That thousands of local school children take field trips aboard it every year to learn about the Chesapeake Bay and our region's history. But that's not all you don't know about Watermark. When the Susquehanna River crested, washing thousands of tons of debris into our waterways, Watermark was there, rolling up their sleeves, helping the Annapolis Harbor Master clean up Ego Alley. And when the Annapolis Police Department SWAT team needed a boat to conduct special training exercises on to help protect our waters, they called Watermark. Watermark, making our mark. To learn more about how Watermark is here for our hometown, visit watermarkjourney.com.
Buying a home is a big accomplishment, and we enjoy being part of that, especially for first-timers. The excitement of being approved and knowing they were building their future in their new home. All over the county, you will find homeowners who received the funds they needed from us. I'm Alan Hyatt, chairman of Severn Bank, and I tell you nothing means more to our bank or me than helping home buyers. Last week, I drove by a house and saw kids playing in the front yard. I recall how excited their parents were when they found out that the home was going to be theirs. So if it's a home, an addition, or a renovation, see us at Severn. You'll find affordable home loans, great service, a commitment to our community, and an enthusiastic team to help you. Severn Bank, here with you.
Online at severnbank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. All loans subject to credit approval. Severn Bank is a trade name used by Severn Savings Bank.
Every now and then you get an email that really kind of intrigues your mind here. And I got one the other week that said, what worked 150 years ago still works today. Tucked beneath Mellon Hall on the St. John's campus is a dusty workshop, and no students are allowed. And it is governed, per se, for lack of a better word, by my guest today, Gary Dunkelberger. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
This is great. And the email that came from Maddie Duhan just said that the Johnnies are using the tools, the creations that you're making down here in what looks like a wood shop to really sort of facilitate their education, which sort of blows my mind in a way because it seems very like we're a little bit engineering down here. Yet St. John's seems to be a little bit more of a, I don't want to say a cerebral school because it's certainly there's...
Well, in the course of their laboratory studies, the students focus on the archaic. They focus on the beginnings of what we think of as modern technology.
Sure, and the classics of the books that they read. And
right. By extension, the science aspect of the curriculum deals with the fundamentals. In other words, as long as a student can comprehend how the basics work, that can be used to build and further their knowledge to deal with modern technology, air quotes included.
Right. Sure, we don't see the air quotes on an audio recording, but so what is it that you're providing to the students here down here, and how did you?
What I do is one of the main thrusts of my job is to recreate the apparatuses used and developed and invented by the old masters, the guys who, the original thinkers, as it were,
right?
In terms of electricity and physics and laws of inertia and motion. And I recreate those apparatus that are in turn used in the labs upstairs, in the classes.
So they're using modern, creative, ancient apparatus,
right?
If for lack of a
because the originals are in museums,
right? Of course.
In fact, we have created several apparatus now that were never reproduced since the originals were made. That device you looked at as you came in the room is called a Ramsden static electricity generator. And we're probably the only school in the country that employs a 230-year-old device to generate static electricity.
Yeah, I just use a balloon. So this is, I mean, the device we looked at, and I'll get a picture and put it into the show notes on the way out. But and what is there, a crank that generates the charge between the?
Yeah, a crank that spins a disc, which is in contact with rabbit fur, creates a static charge on the disc, and then the brass collectors sort of vacuum that static charge off of the disc and hold it in very primitive what would be a capacitor. It will shock you.
Yeah, in more ways than one.
In more ways than one.
How long have you been doing this for St. John's? And has this been something that is I mean, you don't look like you're 300 and some odd years that St. John's is with the age is the oldest school.
Sometimes I feel that old. But
yeah, I do too when you wake up in the morning. But
I've been doing it for 10 years now.
Okay. Now, did you replace somebody that held this for?
Yeah. I think I'm the third generation, as it were, to occupy these shops. The shops have been in operation for a little over 30 years now, I think.
Okay. And what is the title down here? What's your?
Laboratory technician.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing fancy.
I didn't know whether there was a crazy name or something like that. How did you get into this?
Well, I've been a lifelong tinkerer. I've always enjoyed making things with my hands. I did a career in industrial management and then another shorter career in yacht carpentry, building boats, as it were.
Okay.
And now I'm here.
You've sort of married the two and be able to do that. What other types of instruments have you made? I mean, I know we talked about the static electricity generator, the
Ramsden machine. Yeah.
Ramsden.
I've built a fair number of devices that Michael Faraday invented or thought up, as it were, in the early mid-1800s, which really are the basis of what drives our technology today, which is specifically electrical devices. Primitive generators for alternating current and direct current, very first primitive electric motor. And those were some of my favorite projects. They're used every year when the curriculum comes around to it in the laboratories.
Now, are you, and again, without knowing a whole lot about the curriculum myself, are the tutors coming to you and saying this is what we need, or is there like I need to make 3 of these and 4 of those for each year?
Yeah, they don't come directly to me. My supervisor, who is the laboratory director, will lay out a schedule, as it were, of what needs to be built. Can we build this? Do we want to build this? We have discussions. And he is triggered by tutors coming to him with suggestions or requests, and also students. We've had several very remarkable students who had very fertile minds and came to us with suggestions for how to improve things or suggestions for devices that we don't have but could certainly use. And we act upon them.
Now, is there a realm of invention going on down here? I mean, or the plans that have been drawn out from ancient?
No, I don't do any inventing as such. But on the other hand, plans and drawings do not exist for these devices. Everything I have built has been reverse engineered from photographs of the originals and knowing how they work and what they're supposed to do.
Okay, so you've got a photograph or perhaps a artistic drawing of the apparatus in use.
I've built things that were nothing more than sketches in Maxwell's publications of his theories, and some of which were never, as far as we know, were never produced in physicality. Were never actually made. They were talked about and theorized about, and sketches were made, and up till now, people, including our students, have read about it and talked about it, but never actually saw one work. And from that, I made a couple of devices that are now firmly established in the
classroom.
In the classrooms, yeah.
Wow. Why isn't some of this stuff like on display? Why don't you have a display up at the Mitchell Gallery upstairs? Well, it's not really upstairs, but that's
because it's used. It's in use. You know, we use this stuff. It's not museum.
Well, but again, you're as you said, we've got, this is probably the only place in the country, if not the world, where some of these devices are operable that aren't in a museum. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's absolutely fascinating that this is not some device we've ordered out of some scientific catalog to bring into, along with the caseload of beakers to, to teach.
Yeah. And to that end, I have suggested to Mr. Daly, the laboratory director, that at some point in hopefully the far distant future when I'm gone, that they'll take some of my devices and put them behind glass.
I think it would be absolutely. The whole reason that actually I'm here is just because I think it's a fascinating story that we're taking these, and to a degree, Annapolis has a little bit of a history with that. You said you come from a boat building career at some point, but you look at Weems and Plath and some of the sextants and, some of this ancient stuff that is working as well, if not better, than the new GPS controlled stuff that'll tell you to, I know how many times in my car I've gone down the road and it's like, okay, take a left. I'm like, well, there's a building there.
That's why I don't employ GPS.
Smart man.
I'm old school.
Smart man. How many devices do you make in a year, or is it not really?
It's impossible to say. Some years I'm extremely busy. Other years it's at a slower pace. It's what the needs of the classrooms is what drives my schedule. Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not a fair question, but how much time is spent? I guess it depends on what. I can imagine that I'm looking over here. A drill press would be a little bit more complicated to make than a hand drill, and take a little bit more time. But how much time is spent to create, your static electricity generator? Or
that depends on the device. First of all, I'm not a speedy worker. I'm slow and meticulous. And for example, that Ramsden machine, that took several months to build. But that's not the only scope of my job. I also repair the devices that are used in the labs. Not only ones that I have built and have suffered the rigors of student interaction, as it were, but other devices that existed before my time, So,
and then you've got to reverse.
I'm a repairman too.
Okay, and you've got to figure out what went into that to figure that out.
Figure out how, because you can't buy parts for this stuff off the shelf. Right. You can't go online and order these brass.
That damn Radio Shack closed down.
So it's again, it's calls into play some ingenuity and some thinking, and at some point or another, you just have to start doing it. You break out the raw materials and files and planes and chisels, and you just start.
And you whittle it till you get it down to the point where it works. And as I look around, most of your stuff is made with wood?
A combination, wood and metal, yeah.
Okay. And certainly your yacht building comes into play with the ability for the woodworking, for sure, I would imagine, in your engineering background as well. How did you stumble or get into this position?
Very simple. I answered an ad in the newspaper.
There you go. Is it the Capitol?
Yeah, from the Capitol. Yeah.
and it's just you. This is
it.
Your domain here.
Yep. Most days I go through without any human interaction, other than my boss stops down, and we discuss things. But
is that a good thing or a bad thing? I work at home, and sometimes I like.
Oh, it's nice. It's a good thing. I prefer my own company. I don't do my best work with people standing over my shoulder. And
I hear you there. That has to be infuriating when somebody does that. And this area is sort of off limits to students to a degree. I mean, there's no big guard dogs out front or anything like that, but it's
and yes, it is, but it isn't. We don't allow. We certainly don't encourage students to come in and work on things themselves. And that's for a liability reason, mostly, because there's 100 ways to hurt yourself in here. And
I'll find one, I'm sure.
Yeah. But as far as a student knocking on the door and wanting to come in and see what's up, that does happen. Not a lot, but it does happen.
Right. Well, I guess that's sort of like any kind of a physical plant of any kind of a large institution. You don't necessarily want them back in the boilers, but they're not allowed to.
And we've had students who were employed as lab assistants who were maybe, I'm loath to use the word, a cut above their peers, but people who were very keen on learning and the whys and wherefores of these devices that they help to set up and help to demonstrate in the classrooms. And those folks have truly generated more than a few excellent suggestions for new devices, which we acted upon, which we in turn built. After discussion with, others, we came to decisions that, this makes sense. Well, yeah, what a great idea. Let's do it, And it came from students.
Right.
And in the course of building these devices, oftentimes those guys and girls would stop by to see the progress and see how
it's coming together,
because it furthered their understanding of the process and of the device. And
well, it gives them ownership of it too, as well, just as it does you. I hate to keep going back to the static electricity generator, but I mean, I'm sure that I can go to a scientific catalog, Edmunds or something like that, and buy one for $50 or $100 or whatever it is, industrial size. But why does St. John's want to do it this way? Is it because of the tie-in with the classics and the?
Yes, in a way, yes. My personal theory is that it allows the students to get inside the head of those old masters a little bit better. If they're manipulating the devices that those ancient thinkers made and used in their experiments, well, I feel that the students can, at that point, just grasp the theory just a little bit better or a little easier. It's hard to verbalize.
I think I see what you mean. I mean, they can grasp the enormity of it all. Mm-hmm. And similarly, I know we recently had the Viking boat, the Draken, here in town, and the crew that was on that was one that, and I don't know when, but in the 1600s, the original Draken had made the voyage to the New World. Mm-hmm. And they had recreated that. And I think that certainly gives a totally different perspective, taking place in obviously a replica, which actually this is what we're doing here, with a replica. But I mean, you're getting as close to the real deal as you possibly can. I mean, it is not the QE2 or anything that's doing these transatlantic sails.
If all one wished to do was to sail the Atlantic as efficiently as possible, go out and buy a 50-foot Beneteau and a crew to sailor and just do it.
And head off.
But if you want to get a feel for what the ancient sailors experienced, well, you're not going to get that in that Beneteau 50.
No. What is the most complex apparatus or machine or gizmo whirligig that you've...
I built what is called the Coulomb's torsion balance. And here, I'll show you a picture.
Okay. Gary Dunkelberger just happens to have it right here handy.
Well, it's not a picture of the device that I built, but it was originally devised in the late 1700s by Auguste Coulomb, and it is a means of measuring attraction and repulsion of static charges, i.e., very primitive electromagnetism. Quite a complicated little device, and I built it entirely from that photograph.
Wow. Okay, so this is essentially a cylinder,
right? A
glass cylinder,
capped
on top with is that spin around?
Yeah, there's a
track.
a track with which to measure the boom that is inside, very lightweight, and you preload the torsion with a knob up here, and there's a very thin wire that runs through, and the static charge is applied through here.
So this is, I mean, you have created this device solely of this picture. Now, how old is the original in this?
1790, I believe.
And there's not a half-broken one in the corner here that you could bring spare parts from or even just cheat off of.
Now, Coulomb's devices, torsion balances, have been employed down through all of the years, and quite a number of facsimiles exist. We chose to make ours as closely replicated to the original one that we could via that.
How large is this? I mean, the picture doesn't really tell me.
The glass cylinder is about 8 inches, 9 inches in diameter, and the whole device stands about 2 feet tall.
Okay. So I didn't know whether it was a 6 foot tall thing or because you can't really tell from the photograph there.
And I machined all the parts. The only thing that we bought was the glass tube here and that glass
and the cylinder.
Everything else I made.
What was the time? How long did it take you to?
Well, that one took a long time. That one took
months,
4 or 5, maybe 6 months.
Wow. And is that still in use up in the classroom now?
Yes. Yep. The hard truth of the matter is, one could go to Edmunds Scientific and buy a very, very good facsimile that's much simpler.
Right, sure.
And works great.
Well, it's
for, like you said, $50, $60.
If you're looking for the end result, then that's probably a good thing. I mean, I think it's similar to calculators in a degree. I mean, I can add and multiply and divide on a calculator, and I can do it pretty quick, and I'll get a damn accurate answer. But I can take a little bit more time and do it by hand, get the same answer, but now I know where it came from, which is essentially what it appears that you're doing here.
Yeah, and that very, very well describes what we're trying to do here.
And this is my ignorance here, but how big is the science program or the physics or at St. John's? I mean, a lot of people I think have the preconceived notion that it's a bunch of hippies reading the classics, and that certainly is a good deal of it.
That is the entire 4-year curriculum. The classics are read and discussed each of the 4 years. In their junior year, they are exposed to hands-on experimentation in the labs. And said experiments run the gamut from measuring the speed of light, learning the basics of electricity and electromagnetism, how an electric motor works, early basic experiments concerning radio waves.
And this is to get into the heads of the masters.
If you understand how an electric motor works and the principles involved, and if you understand the basic principles of what an electromagnetic pulse is, or which is to say a primitive radio wave, if you understand how that's created and how it works, you can start to begin to understand, how your car operates and how your cell phone works.
The complexities of life
why you get a television signal through the air.
Right.
I mean, that's overly simplified.
Yeah. No.
But you have to start someplace.
But it makes all the sense in the world that it does. It builds
And the students are exposed to that on a large scale during their junior year. They have some labs in their freshman year, virtually none. Now, I could stand to be corrected at this, but virtually none in their sophomore and senior years.
Well, senior year they're writing their
papers.
Right. Getting ready to ring the bells. What's your favorite tradition here at St. John's that you've been here 10 years or don't know?
No, not really. No.
I
like to see the annual senior pranks.
Okay.
They're always innovative and always a surprise.
Have you been a victim?
Thank goodness I've never been a victim.
That's always a fun time there. But St. John's is a very unique place. I mean, it's a small school. It's I think the juxtaposition with the Naval Academy is very interesting. I think the dynamic somehow works in this town. I think there's a lot of things that when you look back on the town and you go, I don't know why things shouldn't work, but for some reason they do, which is kind of unusual here. And this is just a really fascinating aspect of St. John's that I certainly didn't know existed. I didn't realize that they quite got into the science, and it makes all the sense in the world now that you explain it to me, that we're experiencing it as the masters had, whether it be 200, 300, 400, 800 years ago.
Yeah, and another device that we made, it's called a Faraday cage. Now, Faraday cages are very simple device. And right over there is a small Faraday cage. It is simply a wire box.
Looks like a rabbit hutch.
Very much so. And its sole purpose is to disrupt electromagnetic impulses and radio waves from entering or leaving. Now, you might ask yourself, why do we need to know about Faraday cages? Something that was cooked up in the mid-1800s.
I know the answer to that, I think. Security.
Well, security. Secure rooms out of which sound can't escape, or eavesdroppers can't listen in on electronic communications, blah, blah, blah. In fact, the very simplest and most common Faraday cage is your computer and TV cable, the coaxial cable.
Okay.
If you ever dissected one, you'll find a sheathing of wire underneath the outer rubber surface. And that's nothing more nor less than a simple Faraday cage.
And that's preventing a signal from leaking out or coming in.
Right. So we provide these Faraday cages for the students to conduct experiments with. They'll, go inside and try to use their cell phone,
Okay.
That sort of thing.
So just a cage, what's involved in the Faraday cage? I mean, to me, it just looks like a wooden box, like a rabbit hutch with some wire mesh on the side. Is that?
That's essentially all it is. Last year I built a large one of a size that several people can walk into, stand up in, the size of a small truck.
And they could, we'll say, use a cell phone, but I mean, if they could call each other and talk and have a conversation within the cage?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, no, because
it would.
The radio signal has to.
Oh, it's got to go to the satellite and it's got to come back down. It's not point to point. That's right.
And there are a myriad.
It's like the cone of silence on Get Smart.
You betcha. That was a.
No wonder that damn thing never worked.
So we provide several different size Faraday cages, and a myriad experiments are conducted within them. And this one was specifically created for a very sensitive device that we found to be inaccurate when students would crowd around it to watch it work, an electronic device. And we realized that the erratic results were a result of the force fields of the students that were crowded around it.
Okay.
It's that sensitive. So building a small Faraday cage to hold that device and screen the magnetic fields
away from
the observers.
Now, is everything that you do, that you create, that you build, is it all mechanical?
Well, yeah, because almost everything's mechanical. Even going back to some of the devices I built to illustrate Newton's various laws and theories.
Okay.
In a sense, even if it's an inclined plane with a ball rolling down,
or the ball,
that's a mechanical.
Clacking,
it's a mechanical device.
Go back to the Faraday cage. Is that anything special on the mesh? I mean, is it just a
no? I selected a bronze mesh
or bronze
strictly for its long life. It won't rust.
Right. Well, I had heard that rumor has it that there's a building just off of NSA that is operated by a government entity, but it's not on the campus, but that it is wrapped in presumably something like that. Would that
if you drive out Route 32 and you see the big cube of NSA,
Right.
that is one darn big Faraday cage.
Right. Okay. Well, that's it makes sense. I mean, somebody had told me that was with the fire department and said there was a couple buildings out there that.
As far as I know, all of their buildings out there constitute huge Faraday cages. And this was something that was cooked up by Michael Faraday circa 1850, or give or take 10 or 20 years.
Now, where did your interest in all this come from? Your initial career?
No, I've just been an inquisitive soul.
Do you like putting together or taking apart?
Both?
Both? Okay. Yeah. Are you one of those guys that takes it apart to improve it?
I've done that. When I say that a major hobby of mine in a previous life was British sports cars, that might give you a clue.
There's an expensive hobby.
Well, it can be if you don't have the skills to do it yourself.
True. All right, what's your favorite British sports car?
My favorite? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, D-type Jaguar. I never owned one.
That's the one with the huge snout, right? With the cockpit and the way toward the back. It was mostly snout.
Yeah.
My dad had one for a very, very brief time back in the 60s. I don't remember seeing it because I was...
personal cars that I've owned, my favorites were the MGA twin cam, an Austin Haley Series 100M, and 48 MGTC.
Okay.
And all of which required tinkering.
I was just up at a car detailer actually the other day up in Millersville, and they store a bunch of classic cars for people that are collectors that just don't have the room and whatnot. And there's one MGB. I'm guessing it's probably a 72. Does that sound about right? I mean, if but it was it's in mint condition. It's for sale for like I think you said like $17,000. It's got
it sounds about right.
About 40,000 original miles on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, boy, nothing like a little car that's doubled its value over 30 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But I mean, we live in the age of $60,000 Volkswagens now. So
That's
put
true.
it in perspective.
That's true. That is true. What do you drive now? Do you have any?
I drive a Saab.
A what?
A Saab.
Okay. Good old Swedish car. What kind?
9.3, 2-liter turbo, manual transmission.
I had a roommate that had a Sonnet.
Oh, yeah.
Which was in college, which was kind of a neat little. Everyone used to think it looked like a little like the Datsun Z cars, a little bit, and they're like, we get all bent out of shape on that. No, it's a soft Sonnet with a little 2-seater.
Yeah, the only thing they lacked was power. They were grossly underpowered, but they were a very cool car.
But they look nice. It was sort of
and there is certainly a cult following that worships those things.
Well, I'll tell you what, Gary, thank you very much for your time today. I think it's a unique, different insight into St. John's College here in Annapolis, which is one of the top 3 oldest schools in the country.
I think it is the 3rd oldest school, but please don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I'm thinking Harvard might have edged it out a little bit. Or
very slightly. Started as the King William School in 1693. Yep. I should know this, 1693 or 98. One of the two.
There's no test. They don't have any tests here. You're just you're okay. You're okay with that.
Right.
But Gary Dunkelberger is creating the ancient tools that are really the basis of today's science that they're able to use in the classroom today, continuing on. And I think it's fascinating. I mean, I think it's fascinating, and it's exactly what if you know the concept behind how something works and why something works, it makes it a lot easier to move forward as your base.
And one little addition, it not only benefits the students, but it benefits me too. As I create these devices, or recreate them is a better term, I am getting into the mind of the inventor.
Okay,
and it allows me to understand, a little better each time, each device I make, I gain a further knowledge of what the ancients were up against in bringing their ideas to fruition.
It keeps you sharp.
And it keeps me sharp. Keeps keeps me off the streets.
Keeps you off the streets and in the basement of Mellon Hall at St. John's College. But I'll tell you, I want to thank you very much for your time, and I want to grab some photographs of some of these things on the way out to include on this. And I think everybody's listening to this is just going to be like, wow, really? I didn't know this. So this is one of the great untold stories of Annapolis.
Well, it's not completely untold because Wendy Winters,
I know,
rest her soul, sat here and interviewed me just exactly the same way you did, and wrote a very nice article about me in the local paper.
Yeah, that's Wendy is somebody that we miss every single day. I know everything that's the greatest compliment I think that she could probably ever get was Josh McCarrow had said it at one of the services for her. Had said, "Yeah, you loved it when Wendy went up to the Commandant of Midshipmen and said, 'Hey, I want to go to the roof of the Naval Academy Chapel.' And they said, 'Well, no, you can't go there.' She says, 'Okay, well, when do we leave?' So when do we go?" She had a great knack of finding the tunnels under the Capitol, the basement of St. John's College, or up in the domes or up in the water towers and anything like that. So Do Not Enter was not in Wendy's thing, and that's certainly a great loss for the community and the town and everything else. And I'm glad that she was able to get a chance to talk to you. Now I'm going to have to go back and look at dig up the article and see what she...
It was 2 years ago in the spring.
Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate your time, and I'm going to snoop around your shop down here a little bit more.
Well, just watch your step.
Thank you.
Pretty cool, huh?
It was very soothing to listen to. Do you know what it reminds me of? You know what ASMR is?
ASMR?
Yeah, it's a big thing. I used to get
this. Like white noise?
No, it's I had it when I was a kid, and I thought I was the only one who had it. They called it like a braingasm, but it's got, I don't know what ASMR stands for, but it's certain sounds and certain, I guess certain sounds like set this region off in your brain where it kind of pulses. It's hard to explain. There's like probably 10 people right now who are listening who understand what I'm talking about. And so on Reddit, there's like the subreddit that's just dedicated to ASMR. And it's like people who they talk slowly or they scratch their fingernails softly on a table or something. And apparently kids are now catching on to this and they listen to these ASMR videos. And so listening to this guy is kind of like that ASMR thing because it's so Ozzie and Harriet where he just has that tone where he's talking and you're picturing him.
He's very deliberate. He's, I mean, you can tell he's intelligent as hell. And you have to be with the way he's, building these, the column.
If St. John's has to have a science department or some sort of science program, this is exactly what I picture it being.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be like a chemistry class. It's going to be some sort of...
Yeah, it'd be like, whoa, dude, no. You just can't use a beaker.
Right.
We need to get some sand first and
yeah, right.
and make a beaker. And which is really exactly what it is. He said, that you're studying these masters, you're studying these classics, and you need to use the tools that they use.
I was kind of thinking about that. I was listening to something on how stuff's made or whatever it was. It was a podcast and they're talking about the first microscope. And what the first microscope was essentially a bunch of magnifying glasses on a pole, a pole that's about 3 feet high, and you would put them one on top of the other.
Right.
And then you would look at through all of them. That was like the first one.
Who invented the first microscope?
Yes. Jacob Micro.
Ooh, I think I'll challenge you on that one. I thought it was Anton von Leeuwenhoek. And I'm not sure where that name came from. I just pulled it right out.
That sounds like the name you used like when you were 16 buying beer.
No, I really think that's, or maybe the first modern type microscope, where it was, with a slot, where it would hold a slot and stuff like that. But that rings a bell to me, and I don't know why it just came up to me, but it did.
But I just see him making these sort of things that are just kind of like these antiquated, kind of like almost steampunk.
Well, they did. And as we said, leading into it, you said it's almost like he's got the Da Vinci drawings, and the one... And I've got a picture of it that I want to put into the show notes. That's all he had. Not a Da Vinci drawing, but he had a photograph of a representation of what it was and knew what it was supposed to do.
Right.
And made it. It was a glass. I can't remember it was the column. I'm trying to remember the name. I wrote it down someplace. But, he said, okay, well, it's a glass cylinder. So we got a hold of a glass cylinder. And then we realized we had to form, brass balls. And so we metaled them. We mined them. What do you do with them? With metal work?
Grind them.
You grind them down into the spheres and polish them and get them to that, and it generates this, and it needed to go, and he needed to test. He said it took him 6 months to build this one little thing that stands about 18 inches tall. What
a killer job, though, if you think about it. I liked what he was saying. He goes, I like the company of myself. I like to work by myself. And I thought, God, I would love that. Working in a basement of a quiet building all by myself all day is seriously like my dream. No people, no just, and he goes, and I'm not a fast worker. So I'm like, God, you have a project that you're spending 6 months on by yourself. That would be awesome. Well, I'd come home every day. My wife would go, how was work today? I'm like, kick ass.
Gary is the ideal person for that because, I mean, he's got the meticulousness nature about him. I mean, you've got the woodworking in the boats and
oh, yeah.
His prior career and everything else. And I mean, this is just absolutely perfect. I think after we got off the recording, I joked, I said, yeah, I said, so does your wife really appreciate this because you gets it out. But he really loves it there. He loves the kids. He loves interacting with the kids when he does. And it was good. It was, I mean, I've got to admit that I thought when I did the interview with him, I was like, I wonder if this is just going to be a little bit too dry. And probably the similar type of a reaction that you had when I said, hey, I'm talking to Skip Ault from the
library. Yeah, I was like, great.
And as I was going
card catalog,
listening to this again, I'm like going, okay, this is fascinating.
Yeah, it was good.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. That is it. Did I forget something?
Yes, you did. You made some election predictions, my friend. Last week.
Stuart Pittman was going to win by about 4 points.
You did not say Stuart Pittman. You absolutely not. You're a liarhead. It's not what you said. I will say we both agreed that it was not going to be a blue wave. It was going to be a blue tide, and we were both wrong. It was catastrophic for the Republicans. I think the Democrats picked up 30. Well, yeah. Well, and actually, I read Maryland's blog, and they were pretty much like, yeah, this was a complete catastrophe for Republicans in the state.
Anything down ballot of Hogan was not good.
I think that I don't know. There's a lot of theories going around. Like, I think that day, like when the elections are going on, it was like I was glued to the elections like everyone else was, the national elections. And I think all the pundits were like cautious or saying, well, it's not going to be a blue wave. It's not going to, in matter of fact, if they do get the House, and I think now that they're doing the recounts and now that it was pretty catastrophic for the Republicans. Like when Trump came out the other day, and I'm not trying to stir anything up, but he came out the other day with the next day being all celebratory. It was bad. I mean, they picked up 2 Senate seats, I think, and they expected to pick up 4 or even 5, and they picked up 2.
Right.
Because Arizona, they just finished the recount yesterday, I believe.
Right.
But and then I think by the time you hear this, we're going to know what happened down in Georgia with the governorship. But the Democrats picked up, I don't know how many governors. They flipped something like 10 state legislators. It was huge. It was. Now, I could see the Democrats getting super cocky now, but I mean, they look pretty good for the Senate. The next Senate election, and the next election for Senate, and they're going to have to defend all that for the House. But it was a wave, and we said it was not going to be. So we were wrong there.
Well, locally here, I mean, it certainly wasn't well.
I was stunned.
I didn't expect Steve Hsu to lose.
I did not either.
I did expect it to be a little bit tighter than Steve Hsu thought it would be.
Right. I thought it was a given.
And Wes Adams was a big surprise to me. And
yep.
Even Doug Arnold, was the deputy clerk of court.
The clerk of courts.
Deputy clerk of courts for many, many years, as recommended by the outgoing clerk of courts, who by all rights has done wonderfully well, was taken out. And actually, one of my predictions that Tony McConkey was probably going to keep his seat may fail too, because they're right now doing absentee ballots. And that took I think it was like a 365 vote lead down to 196 in the first round.
Oh, you were talking about that in your podcast this morning.
So it's interesting to see if Tony McConkey will lose that seat as well in District 33.
I don't know what it was. I mean, if you take Wes, or not Wes, but if you take Steve Hsu, I assumed he was going to be reelected just because I had never really heard that many criticisms of him from most of the electorate. So I thought he did a fine job. I had no problems with him. So I just wonder if even the local elections were a referendum on Trump. And
without a doubt. I mean, you had, and I remember talking to Steve way back when, really before the campaign kicked into gear. And I said, the indivisibles and the whys and the offsprings of the Women's March, because, I mean, if you remember that was just the most incredible sight whatsoever to see all those women down there in D.C. I said, that is going to be something that's going to resonate for years. And that's going to be something that we're going to need to keep an eye on.
The number of women elected was spectacular. I don't remember the number right off. It was just absolutely amazing.
On a national level and local level.
And then
we went from a county council that had no women to one that is the majority women.
And I was listening to the statistics today. I was reading an article by Nate Silver from 538, and he was just talking about how significant this was. He says this was pretty epic on a lot of reasons. He goes, look at who Trump lost and who the Republicans lost. They lost college-educated white people. The gains with blacks and Hispanics was huge. They lost college-educated women. So this was pretty significant as the people who did vote for Trump last time, they lost him this time. And you wonder what that effect that's going to have, if any, on the 2020 election. But for those people who said Trump's getting reelected, but I would say right now, I think this is hitting the Republican Party, that this was more significant than at first everyone thought it was going to be. It's more. I knew it was going to be a big election. I didn't realize it was going to be not just that the Democrats would sweep like they did, but if you look at the statistics as to who voted, it's pretty
dismal.
It's pretty dismal.
Well, be interesting to see how.
If you're a Republican, if you're a mainstream Republican, and all of a sudden you realize maybe you painted yourself in a corner because the Republicans have kind of turned themselves over to the Trumpism, and now are they stuck with that because now it's the mainstream or the traditional Republicans who are kind of tainted now. I would say on a local level, Wes and Steve Hsu, they're certainly centrists. You know, they're not right. I mean, they're right of center slightly. I mean, they're Republican, but they're not right wing. Or
we'll see. Ended up coming up with like a 70 on that one of all the races. I didn't do too good, but
I don't think it. But you know what? I think that's pretty good. Frankly, I don't want to give you any credit because that hurts me to do that. But
like my kids say, C's get degrees. Yeah, it's okay.
Someone said that to me once. They said, "What do you call a doctor who graduates last in his class?" Doctor.
My father was notorious for that. He'd go to a doctor. He'd say, "Hey," he said, "That's nice. You graduated from Harvard, but what number did you graduate?" You know, I want I'd rather have the top of his class at a B-list school than the bottom of his class at an A-list school. So, well, I will tell you. So I did not fare too well there, but let's just.
I don't think it was that bad.
Let's just wrap it up.
All right.
Next week we're going to talk about the winter weather. George Young, who does my weather forecasting.
I like George.
DMV weather. He does it for the Indianapolis Daily News Brief. He's going to come in and talk about how he forecasts the winter, and he's going to put down. I'm going to hold him to the fire and make him forecast what we can expect this coming winter.
And maybe he could explain the difference between El Nino and La Nina, because I throw those terms around. I have no idea what they mean.
And maybe he will explain that.
I like him. He's a guy that I follow all the time. I go to his DMV. Is it DMV.com? Or DMVweather.com. He's always dead on. I really like him. I got his app too.
Yep. And the app is a little bit different. It's DCMD VA weather. And that's because Apple and Google got all pissed off because he was called DMV and didn't want to confuse him with Department of Motor Vehicles. Like somebody would. But anyhow, get in touch with us if you got any questions, suggestions, thoughts, ideas, anything like that. You can do it at Twitter at MD Krabs Podcast.
We still never get that out smoothly. I don't know why.
It should roll off. It should roll off our tongues like
when we say we have a group and we have a page on Facebook, which we do.
Exactly.
Or info@themarylandcrabs.com. See, that rolls off if you want to email us.
2 years later, Twitter doesn't do it.
No, I still have to stop and think.
It doesn't. Well, here's another one that doesn't roll off the tongue because I just had to write it down. But you can actually, if you want to text us a message or just leave us a message, and we're not going to answer it, so it's an answering machine, if you will.
Answering machine.
443-266-3600.
What's that again?
443-266-3600. And that's a callback, text back line.
I'm going to drunk text it tonight.
That would be fine. We may answer you by text. We may read the text on the next podcast. We may actually take your recorded word and embarrass the hell out of you. We won't identify you unless you tell us.
Yeah, we can even change the voices with that little button there.
Yeah.
You know, we've done that before.
We have. So that's it. Give us a like. Give us, tell your friends and colleagues and everybody else about us.
And the Indianapolis Daily Briefing. Do that.
Share the wealth. And we will see you next week with George Young from DMV Weather.
This has been the Maryland Krabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them at all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandkrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You still here? It's over. Go home. Go.